Welcome, everyone. I'm Mariquita Solis, the live stream host of all-creatures.org. All-creatures.org was founded in 1998 and is a leading resource for faith-based animal rights veganism. We're led by our executive director, Tams Nicholson. We provide free resources for people seeking to live compassionately towards all creatures. Our extensive library includes vegan sermons and commentaries, animal rights strategies, action alerts, events, and works by various vegan authors. We also sponsor websites for animal rights organizations. Our mission is to unite compassionate individuals worldwide who honor the dignity of all creatures. So today we're very honored to welcome my good friend Clare Mann. Clare is a vegan psychologist, communication skills trainer, and the author of several books, including Vystopia, The Anguish of Being Vegan in a Non-Vegan World. Claire became vegan 16 years ago after realizing 30 years of vegetarianism was totally inadequate if she wanted to do everything possible to not use or exploit animals. The skills she acquired through a successful career as an organizational psychologist, university lecturer, and speaker are now applied to help vegans become confident, hopeful, vegan conversationalists who are ushering in a kinder vegan world. Having lived with the burden of knowing vegans are so familiar with, she stood up to the medical world that diminishes our anguish as unnecessary. She therefore coined the phrase Vystopia and now helps vegans all over the world develop powerful ways to become vegan change makers. So thank you for joining us, Claire.
Thank you. I'm absolutely delighted. And I'm amazed that this organization and platform has been going since 1998. That's fantastic. So I must check it out more.
Yes, I know. From Pastor Frank Hoffman has really been working hard. He and his first wife just were so diligent, and he's still continuing on creating this legacy. So it's amazing when we all come together, and that is really it really speaks to things that we're not aware of. Some people might say that veganism really hasn't come a long way, but it has. It really has come a long way.
Yeah. It really has. And I find every day I am very inspired by looking outside of my own circle or the country I live in at the moment, which is Australia. Very easy to look around us and say, why isn't the vegan movement where it needs to be? When we look further, and I was listening to the Vegan Society's podcast recently, I was recently on it, and I got so inspired by the other things they're doing in the UK. The animal rights debate, the animal-free science advocacy. Once you start opening this up, you see that we're little lights all over the world, each using our own skills. And, what I'm really starting to look at, we need to look at social change, don't we, Mariquita, really, to look at how change happens. Awareness is the first thing, but there needs to be policy, there needs to be often legislation, and then it becomes a norm in society. There needs to be enforcement in one sense. And I'm making that very simple. And I'm not a sociologist, I know a fair bit about change, but also making people realize it's not about each person just suddenly stopping eating animals, because there's so many other ways of veganism is what we've talked about. It really is a philosophy of loving kindness towards ourselves, to other people, including the not yet vegans, the vegans in waiting, the ones in the waiting room, but also the ones that don't seem to care, and actually having compassion for their journey. Accountability, yes, but also for all ecosystems. So it's really important, I think, for us to educate ourselves more widely and realize that there are a lot of things happening. The fact that people are even laughing and pushing back and trying to resist veganism shows we've come a long way. Before, it was just a few hippies on the side, probably 50 years ago, that they weren't to be worried about. And I think now the pushback is because because below the notion, the criticism of the fussy diets and putting farmers out of action, we realize that once we reconnect with our loving kindness, can't make, and it's not the business profit model that would actually say we can use people and animals and the earth as we wish. And so the powers that shouldn't be, the large organizations and governments, I think they know we're onto something, because once you reconnect people with their loving kindness and what they were born to do, then we get real change, and we are going to achieve and be part of creating this world, aren't we?
I think so, definitely. And what was resonating with me was unity is all coming together, and also this the collectiveness of one, that we all are one. There's a lot of this I mean that's someone else, right? I like this person because this person's a vegan. Now, I don't like this person because they are not able to immediately change to vegan. And so now we've got a wall between us. And how can we build anything for our planet if there are walls up?
Absolutely. But it's also, and I understand the pain, believe you me, as you know, we've talked so many times. The pain of Vystopia is so great, but that's our pain speaking. If my family become vegan overnight, or the person I'm speaking, my pain will go away. Well, that is our own stuff. And that's what we've talked about so much. The importance of doing the inner work is seeing the good in everybody, and also seeing some of the things that you may not like in yourself. You know, to I don't like, and I actually don't use it, the word HATE. It's a very words are really powerful, aren't they? But people say, that's how I feel about non-vegan. There's no such thing as a non-vegan, I don't believe. Um, it's pre-vegan and pro-vegan, because people do care about animals. They may even care about their own animal, themselves, or their children, or their neighbor, or refugees, or somebody in a charity shop, or at their workplace. They do care, and they will stop to help someone who's tripped in the street. These are all acts of loving kindness. What we're trying to do, I guess, in that awareness of this time in our history, is how much we collectively, there's one collective aspect of culture, is that of human supremacy, really, isn't it?
Oh,
It's actually that animals are less than. That is a universal in every organized thing, because people eat animals and use them and see them as not as significant. And that is really what the vegan is talking about, is expanding that. Because it's so big, we feel that's the biggest problem. But actually, there are lots of acts of loving kindness. And I put a post on this the other day, and someone said, that Clare Mann is so naive. I said, well, I've had a few decades probably being naive, and I'm quite a well-informed naive person. But also, naive is basically, you don't know what you're talking about, and that won't work. Now, that closed mind, as we know, I and you are constantly asking, what else don't we know? Because I always say I'm a vegan. I'm becoming vegan because you realize different aspects of what you're doing may not be as contributive to that kind of world, because everything is so hidden. So let's keep open minds, I think, and ask questions and be an example of the change we want to see.
definitely. I love that. Open minds and letting go of judgment somehow. And now no one's saying it's easy, right? No one's saying that it's, because anger is a natural part of the process. And what would you say about anger? And how should we feel about anger?
Sure, yeah. Well, it's often seen as a destructive emotion, isn't it? Well, I always think no emotions are destructive. They're attunement to the world that inform us of what is important. And for anyone who's finding it difficult, perhaps, to label what they do, a very simple technique it's a very, very complex technique, this one, Marakita, um, which means I like simple things. They're complex, but they're simple, is all emotions seem to fall into four categories: mad, sad, glad, and bad. Okay, we know the glad ones, we know the angry, mad ones hitting out. That's where your energy goes out. Our happy ones, our glad ones. Our bad ones, often the ones we take within us. And I'm saying this to answer the question of the anger one, is it's like the betrayal, it's the resentment. It'll go inwards. Mad, sad, glad, and that's it. We got mad, the angry ones; glad, happy ones; mad, sad. It's sad, of course. Sadness, grief, loss, tears, agony, of that sort of thing going on. Now, I think anger is an interesting one. I have been working with people a long time. I've never seen depression, for instance, where anger isn't present. And that's often where perhaps people turn it on themselves because they don't feel that any difference they can actually make. Um, so anger, I see, is when something we value so much has been violated. So what are we really feeling angry about? So if we're angry at a loved one, it may be that they're not listening to us, that they're disloyal, that um, what we're angry about in this not yet vegan world is something, it's been violated. The horror, what's happening to animals, the way people are, not people are being lied to, how people are making themselves sick. There's a lot of things in our values which are being violated. Our values are the ones that direct our lives, really, aren't they? So I think it's important, firstly, to identify what am I feeling, where is it in my body, and what is it that is. Don't ask why am I angry. You get the justification and a simple response. What is it that's contributing? What is it about what people say to me, or what happens, or what I see? What is really going on here? And it's usually where, our anger keeps us also from feeling perhaps some of the softer emotions of sadness and loss and pain and disappointment. Because when we're angry, we can't feel depressed in one sense. It's when we turn it on ourselves. So I think, but it can be destructive. It's eating away and downing on people and those sort of things, and it's not helpful. So if we can use that and transmute it in that energy of being what's being violated and something that we really want to change, that's when anger can become a powerful tool. If not, it's destructive. It can hurt other people. We're not contributing to the world we want. But it's also understandable. There's a whole lot of terrible things that, are being collectively enacted on animals. But it being angry with people that buy something in shrink wrap at the supermarket, they are just one part of the challenge. And they're part of a whole system that got it to that place. So anyway, that's a bit of a round the house way of going about it. What are your views on anger?
Well, I think it's a great warning. Something's not right. I'm thankful for anger because if I didn't have anger, I wouldn't be an advocate, right? Because I would just be
Yes.
going along flat and not feeling. I would just
Yes.
say, this is fine. So I'm very thankful that I'm angry. And I'm thankful that I've done the work on myself to know how to regulate my anger and not let it attack people. And I have to keep my anger in check. Now, I've done work, but I also get triggered and I also will think, gosh, why are they doing that? Can they not see? And so I have to take a pause. And what I've really learned is that pause is so important. And now that's
Yeah.
taken a lot of time, but that's something that we talk about many times. And I've learned that people I can't be angry at them because they didn't follow the same process that I did. It's very easy for us, we can say, well, why didn't they become vegan? They found out about this.
Yeah.
So in that aspect, what was your journey to veganism? What was it that made you say, aha?
Yeah, that's right. Well, it was about, I say 16 years ago. I really lose sense of time. Gosh, it's 16, 17, 18, something like that. Um, I do believe we're all born vegan. I think we're born with all the potentialities to be a lot of things. But it was really at that time, that shift was, I had been vegetarian for 30 years earlier. Um, Thank goodness, my body realized I wasn't a baby calf. And so I'd given up drinking dairy probably 10 years earlier, which was a great blessing. But I always used to say I was allergic to dairy, but in fact, I wasn't a baby calf. But it's really interesting that I hadn't made that connection when my move towards becoming vegetarian was because I just even read about a cow going to slaughter. And I was so horrified that this happened and how frightened the animals were. And I'd never really thought about it. I was brought up in a family where we Western diet with meat and two veg in the south of England. Good parents, dad getting the vegetables from the garden, that sort of thing in the 60s. But really didn't realize. But I stopped in that moment. So, once then I jogged along, but eating eggs and those sort of things, which are clearly something I kind of bear to think about in many ways. But so it was really, I was living in New Zealand at the time, and I came across what's called pigging or pig dog hunting, which is hunting with pigs, like using dogs. Were mercilessly treated to get them to a state of frenzy of hunger as much as anything. And it was not uncommon for me on my walk in New Zealand in the morning with my rescue dogs to come across little piglets on the side of the thing, and they're left on their own. And we know those mothers would never leave them. And then to see hunters out, and then to hear dogs howling, and knowing I had to investigate, and it was really scary. And we know this when we go into someone's backyard where we know something awful is going on. It's scary. You can get yourself. And I remember holding in my hand a pig dogging animal, a dog, who had been scored by a pig and thrown mercilessly back into the cage, untreated in freezing cold weather. And I held his face in my hands. This is how ferocious he was. All animals understand kindness. And I was hand feeding him. And then I got all those dogs taken away because of the horrendous conditions. And I was so pleased. And I thought, yeah, a few bad apples here. And then within 2 weeks, they were all back because they cleaned up the prisons. And this is the thing encouraging other people may not have expanded that awareness to looking at the potentiality of things, is we must ask questions. Don't just stop. And luckily I didn't stop. My partner didn't stop. Well, what else don't we know? Because he can't just be this guy. And then we uncovered a lot of things. So I'm coming back to Australia, went and looked at the key videos one needs to see. Dominion wasn't out then. Earthlings, Meat Your Meat, Dairy is Scary, all these things. Was brought to my knees. And brought to my knees not only by the horror, but by the fact I didn't know. And this is something for all of us, isn't it? Is, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Those animals came to save me, really. Because we came back, we looked further. And this is the funny thing. We apparently became vegan, but I didn't know what a vegan was. So for the first 2 weeks, we were vegan and we didn't know it. And we just looked at each other, my partner and I, and he said to me, or I said to him, do you think we're going to die? And this is someone who's been vegetarian for 30 years, had the pushback in the 70s of this fussy person having soy milk. And so, realize that where we're at, it sort of comes into that. But I became a vegan. I also became an activist at the time, and I just wanted to do whatever it was that would stop some of the videos that I'd seen, particularly around farrowing cages and what was happening to pigs in Australia at the time. And I was so horrified. So I became an activist at the same time, and that's always been part of my journey.
Well, I've never heard a story like that. That's a very powerful story. And my gosh, I bet that was very, very shocking to see at the time, and that you were able to take action is amazing. And thank you for that. And everyone has a story, and everyone's story is different. So how can we be more compassionate to those people? And why is it important to be compassionate at all to people that we might say, oh, that person's never going to change, and we discount them? Why is compassion important?
Well, it's absolutely important, because if we want to create the vision of the world we want to have, we've got to act it. We have to see it all around us, everywhere, And so we are part of the solution. So, because when will we have this kind of compassionate world? When everyone puts their hand up and says, I've become vegan, and then we can all breathe a hot sigh of relief, and then say, oh, we can get on with our lives now. It doesn't work like that. We need to usher this in by being this, by being an invitation, being kind to people. As you smile at someone in the street, most people smile back. What we give out is what we get back often. Sadly, some people are so broken or medicated or something else that they can't do that. But that doesn't mean we stop that. It's learning to listen. I like the notion of the pre and the pro-vegan. Once we say either or, the world isn't just made up of vegans and non-vegans. It's made up of a lot of different definitions. We try to make sense of the world. People, they're not just selfish out there wondering about what they're going to have for dinner. They have concerns about their health, about their community, about the state of the world. People are doing lots of things that usher in a kinder existence. And so also we want to be invitations for change. I mean, I don't think that means the body beautiful and looking perfect, although, if you're an athlete and you're a health coach, that's important. But being, there's a guy called Bill Moyer. He wrote a book called Doing Democracy, and you may know it, and he was just talking about how social movements come about, and it's a certain aspect of, I think there's a few things subsequently we could add to those things, which is great because we're all learning and growing, but he talks about different roles we have to have in all organizational change. And one of them is the citizen role. And what that means is when we're advocating to other people, it fits in within a collective, expected way of operating. So if we're compassionate and decent and polite and kindly and helpful to our neighbors, for instance, these are citizen values of how can we live reasonably in society. We are affronted when people go down the road and yell at someone, for instance, or they see the old lady cross the road and nobody helps her. Or, well, it's always an old lady. I don't know. It could be an old man, or lots of people, an old dog, or a cat. And but it has to fit in. So if the vegan is ranting and saying you're all bad, that doesn't fit in with people's notion of, well, why can't we live and let live? They haven't seen necessarily what we've seen. So they're just thinking, this person's just telling me what to do. And so it's really important, I think, to speak the language people understand. And actually, you always want people to be surprised that we call ourselves vegan. I've had people go, oh, you're vegan? But you're so nice. But if I told the person I was vegan to start, maybe they would have seen through this collective media, deliberately antagonistic way of seeing the light bearers, in a different sort of way. So, but I would like to say something. You've said you've done work on yourselves, and a lot of people say that is actually, but I think to the listener, we've got to kind of clarify what that is. There are many ways to do that, and I know you have, and continue to, and myself. So what does it mean? It doesn't mean, just seeing a few videos and then doing it. It's looking at your, making conscious, isn't it? Your unconscious drivers, your buttons being pressed. That may be involved in therapy or counseling or going to a retreat or working with a group. But it is a willingness for somebody to hold up a mirror and for us to look at how we contribute to everything that happens in our lives. And I think, the work you're doing is only possible because you have done that and you see your part in this and prepared to see what, is button pressing behavior that doesn't even, it bypasses any logical thing and you just react. We've all been programmed to some extent and conditioned. When we start to see that we can change some things that no longer work for us. And I really encourage people to find a way to do that, because if we try to advocate the invitations to change, but we're having a go at people, it shows that we've really got a blind spot here and we need to look at that. And it's like with the anger, we don't want to just push it down and go, come on, we're all friends together. We shouldn't get angry with people. Find the source of the anger. It's there to tell you something is out of sync. So I hope that's answered the question. We're going around the houses a little there.
Yes, it did, definitely. There's so much to unpack here, and I think going to the core issue. I mean, we can look at the superficial reasons that, someone might not want to go vegan, but we don't know about their life. We don't know what they're going through. Maybe they are so overwhelmed that they can't even get the next rent check, right? And so that they have to focus on that before they can do anything else. And so I mean, I feel like that is one reason that compassion has to, I mean, we have to be compassionate, and we're all going through our own journey and struggles. And so what I love about you is the way that you invite people to hear, that you're not forcing anybody anything. You're not angry at them if they're not ready to hear the message. You're a force of gentleness, and that is that's an attraction, that's it's an attractant, right? And we have to remember that we are going to be able to attract or repel people. And so what you're doing through the kindness and not by labeling people and putting them in a box. I mean, we can say that this is, that these are some behaviors or this is,
Yeah.
but other than you're stuck in this, because when we're saying they're never going to change, that's the foundation.
That's right. And I think people say that, and it's understandable. It's part of our Vystopia, the deep anguish we feel. And when we say, my family will never change, really, we're trying to get some respite from our pain. Because if I give up on my family, at least I'm not pushing and shoving and getting disappointed. They're just a lost cause. But that's our own pain. But how dare we? We don't like to be written off, do we? Oh, you made a mistake once in your life and now you're a lost cause. We can learn and change. The moment of change is right now, And so how dare we, it's understandable, as I say, it's to do with our own pain. It's a signal that actually we're just trying to come to terms with it, our family that, we may have a very close relationship with, except they're not vegan. And you go, how can they be? They're really great people, but they do this. And so we can't, but it's also a bit bigoted on our part if we say they never change. It's making these sweeping statements of other people when we don't like it happening to us. It's I came across an exercise the other day, and you may have come across it. And it's when we come away from a vegan or non-vegan issue or an altercation or an awkward conversation, and often we try to make sense of it, don't we? What could I have done differently? What could I have done that? Well, move back a little bit, get a piece of paper and write, what was going on for the other person? What do I think is going on for the other person in that conversation? What were they thinking? What were they feeling? How did what I say land? And if we can really try to get into that situation and then go, oh, maybe they feel threatened or bullied, or they think I'm a bit of a know-it-all. Next time we have a conversation with them, hold that awareness in your heart and start to ask more questions. Just see if you were right. If you're not, you'll come across other information. But so often we're looking, what could I do differently? Well, let's step into the world of the other and to see how what we're saying lands, or how we make people feel.
I love that because that's curiosity. And you're also letting go of this black and white. Well, I failed or I didn't, or I won and
I
they,
want
so
that's
it's
yeah.
also taking a step back and instead of just putting that what happened into a win or lose box, it's an exploration.
Yes. And I love the trance breakers, as you know. The trance breakers, we can only do that when we're grounded, when we're settled, when we meet people where they're at, without this barrage of, oh, why are they doing that? And I took a day off the other day, and I went out into a little town in Australia somewhere, and there was so many wonderful things. There was a lot of history there. I went to the historical society, but I went to see these beautiful paintings. And I walked in, this woman was so happy to see me, and she's talking about me and talking about the community and why she came to this country when she was a child, and all sorts of wonderful things. She'd been adopted by a single Australian woman and brought back from an orphanage. It was left at a monastery. It was a wonderful story. She was telling me her story. I hadn't asked her it, and she was so happy, and now you've got to keep giving back to the community. She said, and often, the council and the governments haven't been very helpful. I was brought up on a dairy farm here. Okay, and then she started to, but they really didn't care about us. And I said, well, I'm talking, I hardly said anything. And then I said, well, yeah, it's probably not a bad thing. I said, you've obviously got on your feet, and I'm really pleased to hear that. It must have been a shock at the time, but it's probably hidden, benefits there. I said, because number one, it's not good for the animals, and certainly not good for them, and also our health, particularly women's health. And she said, okay, are you a vegetarian? Are you a vegan? And I said, whoa, I hadn't mentioned anything. Miriam, I'm just sitting there. I'm the customer going into the event. And I said, well, that's interesting. So what do you define by each? Oh, look, I know about all this. Are you a vegan for ethical reasons? Half of my family are vegan. I'm not vegan, she said. Half of my family are vegan. Half are vegetarian. So what is it? Now, I could have gone down this route. I could feel I hadn't said anything other than I don't think it's good for the animals. So she was so much nearer to veganism than we were. My family have told me all about this. And what I wanted to say is, well, why don't you, how can, what makes you know that? And I went, do you speak to all your customers like this? And she said, oh, I'm sorry. And then everything melted because it became a bit funny, because that's meeting someone where they're at. I'm a customer. I haven't said anything. Before I look, I know about it all. Are you an ethical one? And I thought, that's why we think we haven't come very far. When the reaction is out of proportion to the threat, as you know, Marakita, it's pressing something else. And a lot of it is our collective guilt, our individual pain that probably as children we were playing with little fluffy lambs, and then our parents gave them for dinner. We didn't realize. And then when we find this out, it's agony. And how do we live with this? And then we've got all the social pushback and where we belong and traditions and the big layer of stuff. But it was so funny because she was doing the advocacy for me, and I went, do you always speak to your customers like this? Oh, I'm so sorry. But my family are constantly. I said, well, it seems your family have. What do you think your family are trying to share with you? And I went down that little tack. But as you know, Marky, we can only do that when we're really grounded, when we realize we don't have to say the perfect thing. We just have to meet. This is citizen behavior. So you're meeting people with what's expected. Do you always speak to your customers like this? It's not in a critical, horrible way. It was how funny, because it made everything go away. Whereas if I'd gone down the ethical thing and this, and how can you live with that, and you know this, and she is already there. She's battling within herself. So, but what she can't do is put that anxiety, that anger, that pushback onto the pushy vegan. If Claire had been the pushy vegan, it's like, here we go, there's another one. I don't want to. It's not only an excuse for her not to align her espoused values with her actions, but we have robbed her of an opportunity to actually step in to what she is, loving kindness. Because she's doing wonderful things for the community. She's got a food swap circle going. She's got a food bank going, and she got funding to help people that don't. She has vegan values, and she's attracting vegans into her life because half the family are vegan, and half of them are vegan for ethical reasons. I love all these different reasons, don't you? I'm going to start saying, why? The people, someone says, why are you vegan? Well, I've got a better chance of going to the moon. What? Because then you just saying it's a trance breaker.
Right.
What do you mean? And say, well, I don't really understand the question. What are we vegan for? It's like, and then you get to people, what do you understand by veganism? And then they'll usually go for diet, of course, or the environment. We're vegan for the environment. I don't really understand that one. So I'm not caring about animals. I don't care about people. I don't give a damn about my health, but I'm doing it for really what I've been told. And our actions do, of course, help the ecosystems and the earth on which we live. But to do it for that, it's a bit distant as well, isn't it? It's over there. who can have a go at the vegan who wants to actually have a light footprint on the earth? But we don't want the vegans that tell us what to eat or think they're more holier than thou. But yeah.
That's funny, but I love the way you disarm people with, keeping light, because you have a choice when someone is pushed back. Now, you can keep it light, and then you disarm this kind of this intensity, and that holds up a mirror to them, because they're not going to say, look, now I feel good. She was so pushy and mean. Now they're not going to be able to say that when you respond with kindness. And that's what that is, they have to look at themselves then.
I think that's right. I love it. It is disarming. But it's also an act of loving kindness. How dare we rob people of the opportunity to feel that disconnect? Because she clearly did, because when the reaction's out of proportion to the threat, something else is going on here. And if we rush to be, well, how can you live with yourself? They redirect it. The reason I'm uncomfortable inside is because of these people. So it's a win-win, and it's a win for the animals, because it's one, you're ushering in someone else who is not going to contribute to the harm that we're causing on such a global, ubiquitous level, and then everybody wins.
Right. Everybody wins. We're coming back to that. We're all connected. We're all one, and we all win with compassion. If the foundation is love and kindness and compassion towards all, then we all win. And we have to be that one stepping up and showing. We have to be like, I want to be like Claire. Why is she so peaceful and kind? What does she
Yeah,
have that I don't have?
that's right. And we're all works in progress. I've been the angry vegan that's had a go at people. And because our pain is so great, you think, can't you see this? We just have to walk past a cafe and get a smell of an animal cooking. It makes me want to be, oh my goodness. And I'm thinking, how do people put this into their body, put this person into their body? How do they do that? But there was a time when we all did that. The associations were different. Which is interesting. Actually, I had a conversation with my partner this morning, and he said, very early this morning, because it's quite early in Australia, and we bought these beautiful herbal oil that is to do a little few aches and pains on the neck thing. And when we first smelt this, he said, what does that remind you of? And it was a beautiful essential oils one, but he said, it's actually the little washcloths on Air New Zealand, on the aircraft. I said, yes, that's exactly what it is, years ago. But then actually, when we opened it last night, he said to me, it didn't smell like Air New Zealand anymore. And I said, actually, I was almost going to say the same thing to you. Now I could smell the geranium and the orange. And I said, I actually think it's because we've created a different association with this wonderful oil that actually is essential oils that is very warming on the back of his leg. Okay, so, and it just taught me something about when we're learning and growing, it's like the associations we have with things. The first time smelling that took us back to a memory. Now our memory is different with the association of this, and we can change, because habits are memory of the body. We can change our habits, our associations. We can either do it through chance, that most of our habits are learned or taught to us as children to clean our teeth or do whatever and go clean our rooms up or something. Or we can actually look, what is not serving me? What can I change? And, there's a lot of literature out there in the general pre-vegan literature, things like atomic habits. How do we, instead of trying to change a really big thing, let's change small things. It's easier to change a smaller thing. So when we're advocating to not yet vegans, it's easier to ask for a smaller change. Now, I don't mean, although I'm not against meat-free Mondays, but, I don't think that's I think we have to getting people to connect with the other and their health and those sort of things. So it's not a case of hopefully they'll do a Monday, then they'll do a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It just means they eat something different on a Monday. However, for a majority of a lot of population, they need some behavioral change there. But the small asks are just asking, just giving chinks of consciousness, sowing the seeds of awareness. I was recently asked about something we have, certain animals eating the crops. Even not the crop. I don't have crops. It makes it sound huge. Doesn't eating the garden, in growing the thing is, do I advocate about animals' rights to be on this earth and who are we to take them and they should all be free, or do I talk about that animal and their part in the biodiversity of this land? And I don't spray anything on plants. I don't. And I have a lovely neighbor who nets her trees for the apples, but she leaves a whole branch with apples out for the birds. Aww. I don't want you taking holes out from every one. It's working with this. We have animals here called cane toads, and they're really, another word I don't like, but demonized and dealt with very brutally and horribly to get rid of them. Is we have them here. I live in Queensland, and I don't want them eating my garden. I don't want to have to net things, but by mistake, I found out how you do this. That's a natural process, I would say. Is I had left some little seedling beds out there, long beds that you can get lots of little plants in. And as the garden was being watered, that happened to be watered, but there were no plants in there. And I got up early one morning and I saw a whole family of cane toads sleeping in there because they went for the damp earth. They hadn't touched any of my garden. Whereas normally they've been burrowing into the damp earth to just try and be damp. And I thought, so what I do is I water these beds at night around the garden, and they go there, and in the morning they're gone. I can't believe that they're so destructive to eating people's crops. If that's all they've got, because it's all been stripped, taken, they could have to eat something. So again, it's working with these things and living alongside. But the person asking me about the toads, I would meet people where they're at, talk about that. And then often I tuck in and say, but more widely, how we treat animals, if it was appropriate. But, when someone gives you a little green light to say something, often less is best, isn't it? Just a chink of consciousness that makes them go, that's interesting.
I know, and sometimes it's better to say nothing. And then, I mean, because if they're not ready for it. And that's when you really, the more you learn about yourself, the more you're able to really be in relationship and be more aware of other people as well.
Absolutely. Definitely.
So Claire, I'd love to hear about spirituality and as it's applicable. I know that you've talked about prayer and how, I mean, does prayer work? What would you say? Meditation? What are your...
Yes. Important to define this, isn't it? Is, we often get people these days saying, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. Again, it's another group to belong to and resistance to organized religion, possibly. But I was brought up actually very much as I had a father who was trying to find the truth. Why are we here? What's our purpose here? what is this all about? And he went through trying many different religions and many different creeds and different ways of being. So it was a wonderful education for us as children to try and just ask, what are we here for? We can't just be here to entertain ourselves and 70 years, as he used to say. And so I was brought up in that tradition. And we always used to kneel by the bed and pray as a child. You know, and I enjoyed the discipline of it. Not the discipline, the connection to something bigger than myself, you know? As I got older and became a teenager, I pushed back against that, as often we do, just to become autonomous. It's part of our, as Eric Erickson says, a part of our, you know, actualization and push back from authority or what has been to develop our own selves, and push back against it. But there's always within me been a path of spiritual practice, I would probably say, is a sense of that we are part of, we are all gods and goddesses ourselves, but there's a sort of sense that we are part, like little fractals of something so much bigger, you know, and I wouldn't dare to say what I think that is, or, you know, say, oh, that's what it is. And I think that's what people might push back against religious practice per se. But I think anything where we can become present, reflective, realize that we are part of a bigger conscious whole. So whether that's prayer with intention, having intentions, acting as if, meditation, self-inquiry, and also seeing ourselves, everyone is someone else's society, I always say. And as the young novice once said to the Buddhist, I'm not like everybody else. He said, and neither are they. And so, so these are very, very important practice, I would definitely say, is to become, to realize that we are part of a cosmic whole, I would say. I think there's a reason for us being here. I think there's a reason we've come from somewhere, probably going somewhere else. I have no answer for what that might be. I'm constantly in that questioning mode. I know I'm not just here to entertain myself. My father said, your job is to leave the place in a bigger, better place than when you came here. But I remember, I'll share a story, and I'm aware of time, is that when I was about 11 years old, I just joined high school. It was a girls' high school in the south of England. And there was a teacher there, the head teacher, you know, when everybody went for assembly in the morning. And we would sing hymns. It wasn't a particularly religious school, but that was part of the English tradition. We would sing hymns. We would have a prayer reading. Then we would have an inspirational talk. And then they would give notices for the school. And there was often a story, an inspirational story. Now, as people queued up, as you probably might remember, anyone who's gone to assembly at school, the tallest girls or boys and boys and girls mixed have to go first because they go right to the end of the assembly line. And so I was the second tallest next to Faye Warren. And so it was hard. It wasn't hard for me to hear because there weren't that many, but in all the different rows, the different A, B, and C, different years. And the teacher said, the headmistress, very small woman, a very short lady, she said, I'm going to tell you a story that if you really get this, it will change your life. My ears went up because that's the sort of conversations I had at home. And she said, when we die, she said, we get a choice to whether we want to go to heaven or hell. She said, you're taken to heaven and the doors open and you see abundance. You hear laughter, you hear music, you see this beautiful spring coming down, the water coming down. There's flowers everywhere, there's fruit, there's animals interacting with each other. Everyone's kind and loving. It's laughter and joy. Wow, she said, that's heaven. And then we take you to hell and we open the doors and there's wailing and there's crying and there's anger and rage and starvation and all the grass that it looks exactly the same, the picture, except everyone's fighting with each other. All the grass has gone yellow and is dry. The food is rotted. The animals are trying to interact badly for their survival and, you know, attacking each other. And there's crying, there's sadness. And she said, that's hell. Where do you want to go? Well, I want to go to heaven. And then she said, but you get to ask, can I just ask you, what do you think the difference is between heaven and hell? Because when we open the doors, the image is the same. The land size, the fruit is there, the water's there, the land's there, the people are there, but one's different than the other. Said Peter or whatever, is when you get there and you die, before we get you to choose, you actually, by your actions, you are taken where you need to be. You create what it is, then heaven or hell. We give you 6-foot long chopsticks and we tie them to your arms. You can't remove them. So they're great big long chopsticks. And the difference between heaven and hell is that in heaven, people are feeding each other because that's the only way they can feed, because they can't get the food into their mouth because they can't maneuver. In heaven, they're feeding each other, and in hell, they're trying to feed themselves.
Wow.
That was so. I see that as our job as vegans in many ways. Is we can either see hell and we can see people as bad, or we can create heaven, or we can create hell by saying, you're not in our group, so we're trying to feed ourselves. We're trying to get our problems solved. Please become vegan and it won't feel so bad and the animals won't have to suffer. But if we start feeding each other and we remind people of the goodness inside of them, whilst things are happening at a systemic level and a policy level and a legislative level, and and some people just have to be some behavioral change. People will just follow as they do in everything. We have to play our part. But let's start by trying to feed other people and usher the goodness in them, because how we make them feel is going to be much more important than what we tell them.
Exactly. I was just thinking about that Maya Angelou quote today about how we make people feel is what they're going to remember. And we're circling back again to unity and the oneness of all. We are all human beings having this experience of life, and it's illogical. And I know our brains want to make it logical, but there's not. It's an expansive experience, and not no one's is the same. And so when we can have compassion for all, then we can really create that vegan world, like you're saying.
Yeah, that's right. We can act it every day. We can, contribute something and be kind and be, yeah, it's interesting.
Yes. Well, what would you say to the person, your final thoughts, I guess, Claire, if we're running out of a little time, I don't want to keep you, but what would you say I mean, like the one thing you want people to remember, maybe someone that's sad and feel like they can't go on, with the Vystopia, what is the hope that you offer them?
Yeah. When things are so bad, a lot of my teachings, a lot of, people that have taught me, my teachers, often say, if you don't believe in yourself, Claire, at this moment, believe in my belief of you. Let me hold the possibility for you. And I know you've done a lot of videos on this and talked in these ways at a time when you, and I'm not sharing anything personally because you've shared it publicly, is a time when you were told you couldn't be anything or you weren't good enough. Sometimes when, let's, you know, be around people and read books, read autobiographies, read other inspirational people. There's teachers out there everywhere. Is your pain is there for a reason, and we need to turn that pain into compost, really, in the same way that um, it's very so. Really, it's two aspects. We really need to put your own oxygen mask on first. If you're angry and you're sad and you're upset, you cannot be the voice of change for animals in every conversation because you're too much in pain. So the loving kindness needs to come to yourself. What does that look like? It's reading widely. It's joining groups that are positive, not just talking about the suffering. Is actually, how do I turn this into positive action for change? Maybe it's seeing a counsellor, because often our reaction to animal suffering or to other people being negative or pushback is pressing a button, and maybe how we were treated when we were young children or something, and we didn't have the agency. You need to go and sort that out. We invest in so many things you know, to make our lives easier, but that is often people don't do that, or if they can't get medical support to do it, and yet they'll spend money on something else. The best thing you can do is to make yourself a better version of yourself every day. And I'd say to you, thank you for being vegan, for caring enough. That's right. But if we really the animals want you to be the best version you can be, but advocate for them. Don't have to be on the world stage. Each of us have to bring our unique skills and creativity to the world. Um, And that's why. But so it's the inner work, and then it has to be matched with explicit communication. We can only do that communication when we're grounded and we're strong. But it is about, and we've changed our mindset to actually see the potentiality. Um, I could have got annoyed at that woman who was that bad customer care the other day. Is actually, but I pressed a button in her. Whoa, was she going down that path? I hadn't said anything. It's and then she had to become aware of her thoughts. But if I'd attacked her, I would have robbed her of something. So, in changing ourselves, that is sometimes the biggest thing. It's not just indulgent. I say to people, it's not. It's not about that. I'll get myself and I'll go out in the world. I gave her a gift because if I had actually, and I could be very eloquent, I could have been very patronizing or anything, but I didn't rob her of the opportunity to step into her veganism. So by you, if you're really struggling with this and you're caught in it, pull back from seeing things and doing things. Do whatever it takes. Take advice to say, how can I become a better version of myself, heal my own pain? Because then when you're talking to people, you are not robbing them of the opportunity to connect with their veganism.
Beautiful. Yes, allow them to grow. I love
Yeah.
that. Yes, and so where can our listeners find you?
Yes. Well, I'm going through a lot of changes at the moment. I'm going to see some amazing things, hopefully developing in the new sort of new year. But I periodically run free Beyond Vystopia masterclasses. They're at the moment there's 3 days. They may change in the future, and that's 1 hour per day. And I help people give them tools and techniques to work on that inner part of themselves, and then match it with communication skills and understand people a little bit more. So that's it, veganpsychologist.com. It's best probably just to go to that website, and the actual link is /master-class-register. But just go to veganpsychologist.com. There should be a little pop-up there which says join the waitlist, and I can advise you of that or other things. I mainly use LinkedIn. I don't use Facebook as much these days, but I'm on LinkedIn because there's communities of people everywhere, and we all need to find our home where best we can advocate.
Yes, well,
And
beautiful.
I would say join the vegan community as well. The vegan community is a global group of people that are bringing people together from all areas, and then you can choose what particularly resonates with you and join the different passion pods and things. So that's another great growing community, isn't it, Marika?
Yes, it is. And the main thing is get out there and find people to support you. Don't do this alone. And like
Yes.
Claire said, that we believe in you, right? We know how beautiful you are, and we see how strong you are.
Yes.
And you just know that. So thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Claire, for
Well,
this
thank you for
beautiful
your work.
and truly beautiful. And well, we'll have to have you come back on later, because you're like we're all works in progress. So we'll check back in definitely in the future. So thank you again so much.
Thank you for the opportunity and amazing work you're doing, and get people to check out this platform. I'm going to, as soon as I'm coming on a podcast or something, I think I haven't actually gone into depth on that. And firstly, be inspired by how many people are out there, and they've been out there for a long time, many people, and you don't even know about them. And there's many, many more. We're not 1%. We're a much bigger force to be reckoned with.
Exactly. Yes. And everybody that's watching, please subscribe to our channel, and also please go to www.all-creatures.org to make a one-time or reoccurring donation for programs like this. All right. Again, thank you so much. And we'll see everyone next